Hey everyone, it's Sarah, and I'm here today with another great recipe for you. Today is a Sunday here, and I was feeling rather nostalgic and thinking about my childhood. And one of the things that I always enjoyed on Sundays, my mother always made a nice pot roast for dinner after church, or she would make a chicken dish, and those were things that she could prepare prior to leaving the house for church, and then she would put in the oven, and when we got home the house would be filled with smells that were amazing. And before you know it, I guess it would be lunch, but we called it dinner because we usually ate about 1 or 2 o'clock, and then later in the day we would just have snacks or leftovers from that meal. So today I'm making for you Mom's Sunday pot roast. Simple recipe. You just have to have a little patience with it because we're going to use a chuck roast, which I have over here to the side. And what we're going to do with our chuck roast, I have all of the things that we're going to be using for this recipe. We're going to be using a chuck roast that I've cut and trimmed a little bit of the fat off of. Also, I have celery, carrot, and onion that we're going to clean and dice into large chunks. And the reason I'm going to use large chunks is this is a large roast, and chuck roast, while it's super flavorful, it takes a long time to become tender, and I don't want my vegetables to totally disintegrate into the roast. I just want the flavor of the vegetables to be part of the juice that is cooking with the roast, but I want to also be able to eat some of these carrots because they're my favorite. And then also I have garlic that we're going to put in, and fresh thyme. I'm going to use a little salt and pepper, some wine, and we're just going to get going. The first thing we have to do is we have to season the meat. I've got a pan right here warming with some oil in it. I also have off to the side another pan with some simmering beef broth that we're going to use for this, along with our wine to create our great sauce. So all we're going to do here is just add a little salt and pepper. I'm always fairly generous with the salt and pepper on a big roast like this because it's very thick and it takes a fair amount of seasoning to give it enough flavor. So don't be shy with the salt and pepper on that roast. I like to press it down before I flip it over so all the stuff doesn't just pop off and end up on the cutting board. I'm going to salt this other side. I'm going to get it in the pan, and what I'm going to do to start off is we're going to put the roast into the pan, and we're going to brown it really well on both sides till we get a little a dark brown caramelization. I like a fair amount of caramelization on this. It's going to cook for a really long time, and that caramelization will add a lot of flavor to your broth. Okay, so from here, we got the pan ready. We're going to put it in gently so we don't get the splash of little oil on there. There we go. I'm going to pop the top on, and I'm just going to let that brown. But I'll tell you what, I like to kind of, okay, this is just me because sometimes I forget I put stuff on the stove, even while I'm cooking. So I usually leave my lid just slightly tilted to the side so I can hear it. And that way I know it's cooking and I know I got to turn it. And if you cook very much, you kind of learn what it sounds like when it's about ready to be turned because the popping sound changes. So what I'm going to do right now is I'll be right back, and I'll have all of these vegetables prepped, celery, carrot, and onion, and we'll be ready to put it all in the pot with the roast and then pop it in the oven. All right, I'll be right back. Hey, we're back. And as you can see, the roast has developed a nice caramelization on it, and we're going to utilize that to help really deepen the flavor of this sauce that was going to develop while we're cooking it. So let's just kind of pile it all in there. I'm going to start with the garlic that I've left just whole. I've taken the skins off, and we're just going to put that around the sides. You could roast the garlic if you want, but it's going to be in the pan for a really long time, so you really don't need to do that because by the time this sauce is all done and this is finished, you're really not even going to see garlic close because you're just kind of going to melt into it. I have fresh thyme here. Now I've left my thyme on the stems because I don't mind picking the stems out. They're super easy to see. And so what I'll do when this is all said and done and I pull the roast out, before I puree the vegetables down into, some of the vegetables into the sauce, I will just remove the stems. So I'm gonna just put those, kind of feather those all around. And I like a lot of thyme, but you could use dried thyme too if you don't have fresh, but I've got a huge garden of herbs right now that I'm trying to use up, and so that's how I'm gonna go about doing it. So I'm gonna stick, as you can see, I cut these onions. These are just whole sweet onions. I cut them into kind of wedges so that they're a little chunky, and I'm gonna tuck those all around the roast. This is gonna smell amazing. It's one of the big things I can remember was just being so excited to get home when my mom was making this and get up and open the door, and the whole house was just, it smelled delicious. And she always made homemade bread a lot of times that she would serve with it. I'm not that industrious, so don't look for homemade bread from me. But it was one of her things. All right, so we're gonna add the celery and the carrot. And we're gonna have a full pot here, but this is gonna kind of collapse and cook down as it cooks. It will reduce down. It's gonna be so good, I can't wait. All right, so pot has everything all chunked up in it. There were a few more carrots than that. I might leave this one out too because I like to eat them. They're delicious, raw, cooked. All right, so to that sauce, we're gonna add 1 cup of red wine. I've got my cup of red wine here, and I have myself a cup too that I can enjoy while it's cooking. And we're also gonna add our broth that we had on the stove that I added our tomato paste to. All right, so I'm gonna add all that in. It's perfect looking. It smells good already. It's gonna smell great when it's after it cooks. So I've got this all, ooh, that's hot. I've got this all prepared. And so that's what it's gonna look like. I'm gonna add a little bit more salt and pepper on the top of this, so because I did not season the vegetables, and so I'm gonna add a little bit of extra seasoning for the vegetables on top, and then also some pepper. And then I'm going to pop this into the oven to bake and to cook for probably 3 hours. So here's a good rule of thumb, and I forgot to do this at the very beginning of this. I will have the recipe for this dish in the drop down menu. So it's in the bottom right hand corner, there's a little arrow. If you hit on that, that's for description of the video, and it'll give you the entire recipe, and you can make any kind of modifications. My mom used to put potatoes in it, and I have done that too. I used to wait and put the potatoes in maybe about halfway through the cooking process so they didn't get all smushy. But my mom, she always just put hers in, and she used, you know, big whole potatoes, and then she would just like maybe quarter them, so they were in really, really big chunks, and they were always not smushy. They were just all perfectly delicious and perfectly cooked. You're gonna put the top on this, we're gonna cook it covered. Always remember this though, read through your entire description, the entire list of what you need and the list of how you go about doing it, and know all the info up front before you begin cooking, because that will keep you from running into some little problem or something that you should have done prior to something else as you go along. That is a great rule of thumb for any recipe, not just something that I'm showing you here, but any recipe that you do, always just like read it all the way through, read all the technique, and that will help you to really never go wrong. So I'm gonna put the top on, get this thing in the oven. Don't look at my oven, it's always dirty because I cook all the time, so we can't all have a perfectly clean oven. I need to hire people to come and keep the kitchen clean while I cook, right? All right, so here we go. right in the center of the oven. I got this oven on like about 350 degrees. I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to check it after about an hour and a half just to see if it still has not lost any fluid. It still has enough to keep it. I don't want to burn it. So just going to check on that. And other than that, it's going to be a while, but I'll be back before you know it. And I think what we're going to do is add a little bit of something in here. I'm going to make a little caramelized onion tart to go with this. Sounds delicious. The pot roast is cooking in the oven. It smells awesome. And I decided that I wanted to make onion tart to go with this. My mom always made homemade light bread or homemade rolls. I can't do that. Well, I could if I tried, but I don't really want to. So, having said all that, we're gonna make a caramelized onion tart. And I've already started this process where I just cut these onions, and I mean, you could do them in full rounds. I just find them hard to kind of stay a consistent size when I cut them in full rounds. So I just cut them in half, and then I'm gonna cut them at about 1/4 of an inch thickness. And all we're gonna do is put them over, you might hear it kind of cooking over here. I've got a little bit of oil and some butter in a pan. That one wasn't quite the same. We kind of want to just try to be consistent with the size of all your onions. And we're just going to put that in there, and it's going to take them a while. So it's another kind of thing that you could do to take up a little bit of time while that 3 hours worth of cooking is happening for your pot roast. So, got all that ready. I'm going to put it over in the pan, and while I was in the refrigerator, I found in my crisper 3 random apples. They don't match. But I have laid out 2 puff pastries that we're going to use for this caramelized onion tart. And I've decided I'm going to use 1 puff pastry because that's plenty big, and my husband and I wouldn't eat more than that portion. And it's not great leftover. So I'm going to make 1 caramelized onion tart, and I'm going to make a dessert out of these 3 random apples. We'll see what it comes up with a puff pastry. And I'm going to stick these over here really quick. Get them in. You don't really want to cook them too fast. So we're going to get them in. You're going to develop slow color on them. I'm using sweet onions. A lot of people add sugar to their caramelized onions, but I find if you have a nice quality sweet onion, you really don't need to add additional sugar to it. So we're going to cook it. I'm going to add these onions. I'm going to spread them out there. And the most important thing with the onions is just to watch them. So don't cook them too fast. I have them on kind of a lower end of medium heat, and I'm just gonna let them cook. And I'll stir them every maybe 10 minutes. And it's gonna probably take somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes for them to caramelize. And I'll show you what they look like when they all get done, okay? All right, I'll be right back. I wanted to give you an idea of what these onions are doing, so I brought you over here. So to look nice here, down into where the onions are. And this is about 12 minutes into a fairly medium heat, low to medium heat simmer. So that's where you're at. Our hope is to get them all around this color without burning them, all right? I'll keep my fingers crossed. All right, so now we got a little over halfway done on the roast. And what I'm trying to do here is put together our caramelized onion tart. These are the onions. So you saw when I put those in the pan, it was like an entire pan full. This is how many you end up with. Okay, I might have eaten like maybe 1 or 2, but this is how many you end up with, and this is the color that you're looking for, which is just a nice caramel color, and they smell delicious. So we're going to put these over here, and I'm going to make a little rustic apple tart for us to have, or not apple tart, but a rustic onion tart for us to have with our Sunday meal, with the exception of this is going to be our bread substitute. Okay, so I'm going to add, I have right here about 1.5 cups of yogurt. The dog is eating something outside, so you may hear a little bit of that. And then I have right here a half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese. I'm gonna add that to the yogurt. I'm gonna add just a little bit of, like probably half of a teaspoon of pepper. I don't really measure, but I will put measurements in. And I don't need any salt on this because the Parmesan is fairly salty. So we're gonna just mix that up together, nice and incorporated. And then I'm going to roll out this puff pastry. Now, as I mentioned before, the puff pastry comes with 2 puff pastries in a container. And so when you thaw them, you automatically thaw 2 because they're sealed up together. I'm only going to use 1 for this tart, and so I decided, since I found 3 apples in the refrigerator crisper, that was totally random, that I'm going to make a little rustic apple tart too, so we can have that for dessert. I don't normally make dessert. I'm not a huge dessert person, but you know, today's Sunday, so why not? So right here, I'm going to add a little bit of flour to my work surface, and as you can see, I've kind of moved over to my granite because it's an easier place to roll out a little bit of dough on. Rolling on the wood chopping board tends to make it stick, so I'm just going to pat that out, get it out there nice, and get some on my hands so I don't get it all stuck to me. And here is our puff pastry that I thoroughly thawed, and it is folded in 3 pieces if you've never used it. There's like paper in between, so you remove that. I'm going to lay it down here and flatten it out a bit. So I'm going to take some of that flour. You'll see the puff pastry in the inside folded part has a little bit of flour on it anyway, because we are they don't want it to stick together. I'm going to put that there, and then I'm going to take my rolling pin, and I'm going to do the same thing here, put a little bit of flour on it. And all I want to do is just get this a little bit bigger than what it was. And you know, sometimes I like to do these in a circle. This is like just freeform. So, you know, I'm just going to roll it out a bit, and then I'm just going to put it on my pan and make some edges to it so that my filling doesn't roll out. And it'll be perfect because, you know, when you're cooking at home, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be imperfect. It'll still be perfect. So we're going to take this, pull it up, see how nice it lifts up, and put it right on that pan. Now, it might be a little bit big, and that's fine because we're going to roll the edges. And what I'm going to do now is try to get a lot of this off here. It moves really easy because it's on the granite. If I had it over on that wood surface, it would not be nearly as easy to get off. I'm going to move this pan here. And then, hang on, I have to get a fork. I forgot to get a fork. We're going to have to, it's called dock it. We're going to dock our pastry with a fork. And all docking is sticking holes down there. And that keeps it from getting like bubbled up and getting too fat. We want it to bake and have a nice puffy crust, but we don't want it to be like a giant puffy. I use such technical terms when I cook. Giant puffy, smushy, you get it, right? All right, here. I am going to take the edge of the puff pastry and just roll it up just enough so that I can make a little, just like a little bit of a pastry container. So that the yogurt and cheese mixture won't roll out of it as it bakes. Just rolling all around the edge, and as you can see, I am not doing it all fancy. I am just rolling it. You could do it fancy, but this is rustic, and that's not fancy. All right, so nice edge on that. Kind of as it puffs up, now that edge will puff up even more, so that'll really make a nice little container for our mixture here. So I'm going to take this, the yogurt mixture, and I may have a little bit too much for one puff pastry, but it should be pretty close. I was modifying my recipe as I go along because often my recipes are in my head, and I think I know exactly how much it's going to take, and I actually do pretty good. But sometimes I miss the mark just a bit. obviously, if you want to have a bigger family and you want to make more of this, you could. It doesn't really hold super well. Like, so it's not something that I kind of would eat as a leftover because it gets the crust, while it will stay nice, I like eating it kind of warm, and it's hard to warm up without the crust getting soggy feeling. So I like to make just what we're going to eat, and maybe if you have a couple pieces left over, it's taken pretty much all this. I was a good guesser. The hardest part for me, I will take recipes, and I read recipes, and then I'll adapt them and change things around to kind of suit my taste. But my biggest problem is when I get ready to put down a recipe for you guys is I'm like, whoa, I've got to write the whole thing that hard. And so I used almost all of it. There might be like, I don't know, 1/8 of a cup left in there. I'm going to set that off to the side. And then I'm going to take these beautiful caramelized onions, and I drained them in a fine mesh sieve because I wanted to get all the fat out of them so that they didn't get too fatty on this tart. I'm just gonna put them on here, and they're cooled, not totally cooled, but they're cooled enough that they don't burn your hands. So they're just a little bit warm. And you just want to spread them out evenly. I can't wait to eat this. No. Spread them. I can put those off the side. And as you spread them, what we have in here, I did salt and pepper the onions as I was baking them, and that I did not show you guys, or not baking them, but as I was sauteing them and caramelizing them, I did add a little salt and pepper after they started cooking. Good. All right, I've used them all. I may have eaten a couple while they were resting. You always have to taste things. You just don't want to serve stuff to your family that you don't know is perfect or at least tasty, so I always taste things. All right, so that's ready to roll. Got a little salt and pepper on it, got our cheese, got our yogurt, looks good. I'm gonna put this into the refrigerator, covered, so that it can just chill while I finish cooking over here, because I've got probably another hour and a half to cook, so I don't want this to be too quick and putting it in the oven, because it'll take about 30 minutes for it to bake, but I like for them kind of like to all get ready together. All right, so I'll be back in a moment. Now what we'd like to do, or what I'd like to do, is I'm going to take that onion tart that I just pulled out of the refrigerator, there it is, and I'm going to rinse my brush out. Just one second. Alexa, stop. I utilize Alexa always for my timing, because otherwise I forget what I have going on. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I made an egg wash. 1 egg and about a teaspoon of water, and then I just kind of whipped it up together, and I'm going to take that egg wash around the outside of that crust, and that is just going to give it a nice shiny brown texture after it while it bakes, just right along the edge. I hope you are enjoying, or hopefully you will enjoy this meal if you decide to make it for yourself. Inspired by my mother, at least the pot roast part of it, I decided to make the apple tart, or the onion tart, because I don't like to make bread. And then we added in the rustic apple tart, or apple crostata it's called, kind of randomly, because I found 3 apples in my refrigerator. So this is ready to put into the oven. I'm going to stick it in there, and when I put this in, I'm going to go ahead and pull the roast out, and I'll show you what it looks like. So it's ready. I'm super excited. So let's plate this up. What I'm going to do here is I have some rice that I had left over from yesterday that I microwaved just to warm it up. And I often, when I make rice, will make more than I need because I will use it in another dish. So I'm going to pull that off here and just kind of sit it in a pile. I'm going to put my meat here on top of that, and then the juices from the meat will drain down into this, okay? That little bit. So the vegetables look awesome. They're super tender because they've cooked for a long time, but I don't mind that in a dish like this because that's how it's supposed to be. Nice, tender veggies. I'm going to drain those and put them off onto the side here. We have carrot and celery and onion. In here. What I'm going to do here is, oh, Alexa, stop. Our tart is almost ready. I'll get that out in just a second. The onion tart that I put in as I pulled out the apple crostini. Actually, they were in there for a little while at the same time. So I'm going to just remove all these vegetables, and then I'm going to remove the meat and slice it. Put it on top of this rice. You don't have to watch all that. I know you don't want to. So then I'm going to skim off the fat of the sauce, and I'll come right back and show you what I'm going to do with it. Okay, so I have pulled all of the vegetables that I wanted to eat out, and then I have the meat cut into kind of chunks. And what I've done now is I've skimmed off the fat, or all that I could get off after I picked all of the thyme stems out. And I'm using my immersion blender. Now, so here's the thing. Number one, you gotta be careful with the immersion blender or you start wearing whatever it is you're immersing. But also, you don't have to do this. My mom didn't do this. My mom served it right out of the oven. We loved it. It was delicious. We didn't have any of this gravy made out of the sauce. It was just eat the sauce as it is, and it was perfectly good. And that's perfectly good too. But I was going to show you how you could like take it up a notch. Okay? So I've used the immersion blender. I have a slurry here because it's kind of loose. I have a slurry here of a little bit of cornstarch and a little bit of water. I'll put the exact measurements in the recipe. I'm going to sit it over here on the stove just long enough for it to tighten up and get slightly thicker. I'm going to use this spoon. I'm going to stir around that. And as soon as the heat hits it and it starts coming to, it doesn't even have to boil, just coming to a good simmer, the cornstarch will do its trick and it'll thicken right up. So what we have here is meat. I'm going to pour that gravy over this meat. It's going to be good. And then over here we have our tart, our caramelized onion tart. And I'm just going to cut that in squares, and I'll serve it with all this. So I'm going to let this gravy come to a boil, and then we'll finish this off. So, as you notice, I have a new shirt on. It was an accident with the sauce, so I didn't think you'd want to see me wearing that as I exit this video. I'm gonna take the sauce that I made, and we're gonna move it over here where we can get a hold of it. It looks really good. Okay, so here's the thing. When I tasted it, and I'll include this in the menu, I thought it just like needed a little something, all right? So just a little flavor. And so what I did was I put in 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. Soy sauce can fix almost anything. All right, so I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna drizzle it over the meat. You don't have to do this. You can put it in a cup. You don't even have to make the sauce. You could just serve the sauce as it was right out of the oven. Serve it in kind of a low bowl so that you get all of the juice along with the meat. There's going to be a lot of extra sauce, and that'll be great because we're obviously going to have leftovers here. And that way we have a little extra sauce that when we heat it up, we can put on it, and it'll help keep it really moist. You'll put a little, drizzle a little bit on the vegetables. And there it is. I'm not sure if I can lift it up and show it to you without spilling it in the floor. There it is. So, my mother's pot roast, Margaret's pot roast. And caramelized apple tart. No, not apple tart, but onion tart. I have two tarts, so I keep getting confused. Caramelized tart. You can eat it as it is. You don't have to make the sauce. You can make it your own. Put different vegetables in it if you want. That's the great thing about cooking. You cook for your own taste. That's what I do. And you could chop it off if you wanted with a light green salad with just a very, very light vinaigrette. It would be the perfect meal. It's gonna be the perfect meal. All right, so my toast today is to Margaret, my mother, who inspired my pot roast. I'm gonna cry. Made me the person I am today. Thanks for joining me.